I want to broach a topic that Steve brought up. It's the idealistic view of us fans versus cold hard business, Steve, and what we should have, what should be realistic expectations. Now, what I've done is I've used this whole Super League thing in my head, just me as a football fan, and used it as a way to realise that since the Premier League was brought in 1992, we've all been complicit in this. So Sky and other media sources have jumped on the high horses because they've got vested interests. Us as fans have always been idealists and always will be, in a way. We'll support the club. We think there's a right and wrong way of doing things, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, we sold our soul when the Premier League annexed itself away from the rest of the Football League. So I'd like to use this whole fiasco as a way to try and figure out how we can redress that balance and we can stop a Bury from happening again, or we can stop a Bolton.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, like we said, this is not an overnight thing. And I fully take on board, what Jack's saying. And I'm not in any way trying to defend it or anything, but, we've come, we've crossed the Rubicon a long time ago on this, haven't we? We are well past that point of it being this kind of idealistic working man's game where people don't try and make money out of it. The reason that owners buy football clubs at whatever level is because they think they can make a quick buck out of it. That's the only reason. And yeah, there are some owners that are better at it, and there are some owners who do take into account the fans. And we thought, you could argue we do or we don't, but we thought we had an owner like that. There are some like the Glazers who literally don't give a stuff. And there's plenty in between, but the common factor is that they all want to make money. They all want to make money. I mean, unless you get a Abramovich, kind of, or a Sheikh Mansour who are, they're so rich they can have little playthings. Football clubs as playthings, but owners don't, in general, buy football clubs, to advance the fans' interests and to give the fans a lovely experience. I mean, a lot of them recognise that success on the pitch and off the pitch is related, so it all kind of works with some owners. But this is the problem: the idea that Liverpool could be, we've had this great success over the last 2 or 3 years largely because our owners have had the money to put into it because they're cutthroat businessmen. But that's the reality of it, isn't it? And when cutthroat businessmen get a chance to make a few more quid, that's what they do. And yeah, I mean, we hoped that they wouldn't, necessarily go down the way they've gone, but I'm not trying to defend it. Don't get me wrong. I agree with Jack. It's been a horrible week and it's been a horrendous experience, and I don't want to ever talk about it again. But we can't pretend that this isn't the way football is now.
We are in this really difficult position, I think, particularly as Liverpool fans, because I don't want to put. Again, you sound like you're apologising here on behalf of them, but I'm not. Yeah. I don't want to put FSG in there with the Glazers. They're not that type of owner. So have they made mistakes? An awful lot at this point. The 77 quid ticket thing, the Project Big Picture, the furloughing of staff, lots of other things. They've always come out and apologised. But this one feels particularly stupid because a quick chat with Klopp, a chat with any of the players, anybody would have given you the outcome that was going to come here by the way this was pitched. And Steve put it at the start. He's worked in PR. That's a PR disaster. That could have been sold so much better as a dream, as something, and explain to us why the money will go down through to grassroots football, and explain and promote more like they did to some extent about how it's going to improve the women's game and have a matching women's competition. There could have been a way to sell it, but at the end of the day, we still wouldn't have wanted it because we're used to our own way of doing things. So what I would ask is, what do we do here with regards to our owners? Because Jack's annoyed, I'm annoyed, Steve annoyed. Some of us are more pragmatic than others. Some of us are more bitter than others. Some of us look at the wider picture and the positive things versus the negative things. It really is, and I'll bring us back to an Ian Eyre quote from before, be careful what you wish for. Because we really are in a very delicate situation right now, I think.
Yeah, it's difficult. I've openly said before, prior to this, I was on FSG's side. I thought they were very good businessmen. Their runnings of the club, they'd made some mistakes, but they'd always made U-turns, rectified it, held their hands up, apologized. But for me, this was just one step too far from them. I completely agree with what Steve has to say, and I've had lots of conversations about this week, and you're absolutely right there, Craig, about being careful what you wish for. And we could force FSG's hand in selling the club, and then it could be the biggest mistake we've ever made. But one thing I will say is, it just didn't wash with me, the whole video with the yellow roses in the background, the sorry. As Jurgen Klopp said, I think the day after, he hadn't had a conversation with John W. Henry after that, and it was just an apology to Klopp via video as well. So it's heartbreaking what's happened the last week. It really is. But I think it can be helped in other ways. We don't necessarily need to force FSG out. But the alarming thing for me wasn't necessarily just the decision to make the idea for the Super League. It was how quickly it happened. The news broke on Sunday, as you said, after the United game, Craig. And then there was an announcement a few hours later, and we were told by Sky and other media companies and corporations that, the clubs didn't really care about PR and that they were expecting it, really. So for me, that's what we need to avoid, things like that again. If they have a proposal like that, that's fine. Put it to us as the fans, put it to, the media. Let's have a vote as fans. Who wants it? Who doesn't want it? Let's see what we think of your proposals. But, for them to take ownership and for 12 greedy businessmen to go, this is what we're doing, this is how we're changing the game that is yours and that you all love. I think that is what the disgrace is here. And for me, that's where they broke the trust barrier of us football fans.
Steve, you said earlier on, you were playing devil's advocate. And I remember back to the day, I was straight on as soon as that news broke, and I was streaming for hours and hours, and loads of people were in, and I was demanding John W. Henry sit in front of a camera and talk about this. And to be fair, he did. But did the information that he was forthcoming with work with you? Did you feel like he gave a sincere apology? Do you feel like he had any duty to give an apology? How did it come across to you?
I'm quite a naturally trusting person, I think. I've always been like that. And I think I know people questioned the kind of PR style, like Jack says, the yellow roses and all that kind of thing. That's been going on for years. People have been manipulating what people think of announcements or that kind of thing for years, whether it's a yellow roses or, whatever it is. Someone holds a baby in a picture. It's, there's a million ways that, messages in all different facets of life are manipulated to make us, the viewer, think a certain way. So we shouldn't really criticize for that. I guess it kind of comes from whether you're fundamentally, skeptical, or whether you fundamentally trust, him, and you think you made a mistake. And I think, from my perspective, all of the, if we accept that all these owners are after money at the end of the day, all of them, I firmly believe that our owners are at the acceptable end of that nasty scale, if that makes sense. And the Glazers are at the opposite end, and other people are kind of, scattered somewhere in between. But ours are at the acceptable end, and that doesn't mean they don't make mistakes, because we know they do. And I just this is actually kind of what made it so hard in the first place, isn't it? Because we were all under this impression, weren't we? I was the same journalist friend. He was going much bigger on Liverpool as a story, because the United fans don't think anything different about their owners. Like, that was no surprise to them, but it was a surprise to us because we did trust them.
And that's the thing for me.
No, I fully get that.
But that's why it hurts. That's why it feels someone has cheated on you in a relationship. So at what point do you start to heal And at what point do we, like, this has created more divisiveness amongst their fans. If it's, as if it wasn't already divisive enough with the struggle to get tickets and the locals against non-locals and all these other things that divide fans and the Liverpool way and, you know, so many different things. This has probably created an even bigger divide at a time when we probably need to come together and have a grown-up conversation. But how on earth do you do that?
The important thing you said, though, Craig, was be careful what you wish for, and that's a phrase that came into my head a lot during the week, and it's really important because you know, they could sell the club to one of these Middle Eastern consortiums or you know, Sheikh Mansour types who've got, you know, more money than sense. Is that going to give us what we want? Would they have said no to a Super League? Probably not. I don't think so.
Do you know one thing I will point out, though? You know, you spoke before, Steve, and I do agree with you about, you know, the sort of spectrum of owners and the Glazers and the Cronkies being at, you know, one end and FSG being at the acceptable end. But, you know, again, playing devil's advocate with that, is it just that FSG are better at pretending that they care? Because, you know, we've been fed bollocks slogans that we know is a load of rubbish now, like, you know, this means more unity as strength. We're led to believe that they, you know, share what us fans believe. They share the feelings of the city of what we are as a club, but are they actually just better at pretending than owners like the Glazers? Because
it's a fair point.
You know, yeah. I think that may be the case, and that's where the anger's coming from. And, you know, Craig said it then. You wouldn't accept this in any other walk of life. Like, they did go behind our back, and if they were the owners that we thought they were and where we think they are on, you know, the spectrum, they would have come to us and gone, look, we've been asked this by Florentino Perez. This is what we propose. This is why it would be good for our club. What would you fans think? And I tell you what, as supporters, we would respect them so much for doing that. But no, they went behind our back. A few hours, it's released. Boom. You see that short statement from the club. And that was it for me as well. When we pulled out of the deal, you know, it overnight, it took hours before we had that apology off Henry. It was a very, very short statement, 46 words, I think it was. It was a disgrace. It really, really was. And that's
I looked at the Tottenham one that came out, you know, just before, I think, and it had this thing from Daniel Levy. And my first thought was, I don't believe a word he said. I actually didn't mind I didn't mind the sort of more considered approach. I think the comparison with other walks of life is a bit tricky, isn't it? Because, you know, people that buy Hoovers or vacuum cleaners don't demand a say in how Dyson runs or how Hoover, you know,
unless you are James Dyson, in which case you just send Boris an L text telling them 30 things along.
You know what I mean? Like the fans in other walks of life aren't stakeholders in the same way. They're not emotionally invested. So this is kind of where the idea of fan vetoes or fan involvement in boards is totally individual to football, and it needs some thought, because it's, you know, we've seen the Germany model, etc., but it needs a bit of thought, I think, because fans, goes back to what I said at the start about, you know, can we get what we want on the pitch with what we want off it, and a fan thinks in a completely different way to get to that point, and you sort of need both, don't you?